Welcome back to another episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. I am your host, the Salty Nerd. In today's episode, we're talking all about vampires because it's Jude's birthday month and she wanted to talk about vampires.
August
Bites. Welcome, everybody, to August Bites. That's right. We're talking everything that has teeth. We're talking sharks, vampires, and all kinds of other crazy bitey blood stuff. We're also drinking red wine, which is very fitting.
Bitey blood stuff.
I love that. Blood stuff.
Hashtag.
That's a t-shirt.
Hashtag bitey blood stuff.
Before we get really into it, I did want to do a very special shout out to our top patron, Haas Boy. He's out there from Australia reaching out to us. He has upgraded his Patreon to the Barbarian level, which is freaking phenomenal. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your support. You're always listening to the podcast. You're direct messaging me, giving me ideas for new episodes. And I really do appreciate your feedback and your support, as we all do, I'm sure. We look forward to more of you guys joining the Patreon. If you guys want to support our drinking habit, we'd really appreciate it.
Nice segue.
All Patreon proceeds go towards alcohol.
Yes.
Goes towards wink.com, who does not sponsor the podcast, but
Yet.
whom we anticipate will be sponsoring the podcast, wink.com.
If you like our content, please help us reach 1,000 Patreon subscribers. The reason why we're trying to get to 1,000 because at that level, we'll be able to achieve our goal of making enough off the podcast to do it full time. That means we're going to be able to give you guys more episodes, better quality content. We can afford some better soundproofing, even some better equipment. And we can also, with the ultimate goal for me personally, is to be able to do this full time, which is bringing you guys as much content as possible, talking about movies, talking about video games, moving into the Twitch live streaming thing. We're trying to reach out across all the platforms to offer you guys some really great content. So please help us by going to saltynerdclub.com.
That's the Alex Sugar Daddy Fund.
Yes, that's the Sugar Daddy Fund. You guys can go there, sign up for whichever tier you want. Doesn't matter if it's $5, if it's $10, or if you want to be a badass like Haas, you can do the $20 tier. If
you think Alex is cute, send him $20 a week.
Go to my TikTok. I make awesome videos.
He's very handsome.
But anyway,
he's not Humperdinck handsome though.
Oh man,
not
he
quite.
was.
That guy's fire.
Dude, I can't wait. Humperdinck. Anyway,
Mr. Chris Sarandon over here.
Go to saltynerdclub.com. Help support the podcast. Help us grow this channel. If you enjoy our content, it really does go a long way, and we really appreciate it.
If you just think I'm funnier when I'm drunk, go to wink.com.
If you think Jude's funnier when she's drunk, sign up for our Patreon. We can afford more alcohol.
Yeah. And if you don't want to be part of our Patreon, go to iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast and leave us a review.
All right, anyway, today's episode, we're going to be discussing 3 movies that have to do with vampires. And of course, because they were Jude's picks, they are all freaking classics. 80s classics and 190s. We're talking Lost Boys. We're talking Fright Night. And we're also talking Dusk Till Dawn. Yeah. Robert Rodriguez.
Really stupid.
No, it's not, Vader.
Almost like he's
Jude, I do need to warn you, though. I am going to shit on at least 2 out of the 3 of these movies.
I totally expected that.
Okay. All right, good. So which one? You wanted to start with Fright Night, correct?
Well, I want to start with the fact that Vader is not here, but we do have him
on a soundboard.
In our soundboard.
What's up, Boo?
As though he were here.
We miss him.
Okay, so
I hate everything.
All right, f*** off for a moment.
Stop pushing the buttons, Kate.
This is my moment. So Vader had some family obligations, so he couldn't be here with us today. But Vader loves vampires, and he was very disappointed that he couldn't be here with us today. And we are also very disappointed that
I'm very grumpy.
Jesus.
Talk about Fright Night. What's going on with Fright Night?
Fright Night?
Yeah. Tell me about Humperdinck.
Humperdinck.
All right, so if you guys haven't seen Fright Night, this is my first time watching 2 of these movies. Fright Night, I've never seen it. I don't even think I've heard of it.
Shocker.
So I watched it, and I was like, okay, it's pretty good. It's got, that cheesy 80s kind of horror thing going on. And then I saw the vampire, and I was like, is that Prince Humperdinck?
Yeah.
Every time I see Chris Sarandon, I'm just in my head, I'm like, Humperdinck.
Forever.
Humperdinck.
Forever.
He can never get away from it.
Always be Humperdinck.
But he's got some 80s glam in this movie, though. My gosh.
He's so seductive.
He brought the sexy back.
There's a looker in this movie. That curly hair and all those little smoldering looks.
Yeah. Okay, so Fright Night, released in 1985. The budget was $9 million. It was,
That's it?
Yeah, it was directed by Tom Holland, who I think was a first-time director.
Oh, so this isn't the Spider-Man Tom Holland.
No, he wasn't born yet.
No, this is Tom Holland. He was a pretty successful screenwriter. He created the Child's Play franchise, and this was his first movie as a director.
Yeah, I think his claim to fame before directing this was just like writing
Psycho
the
2.
Psycho sequel.
The sequel to Psycho.
Yeah.
The Hitchcock movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Psycho 2 wasn't the Hitchcock movie, but it was the sequel to the Hitchcock movie that he had wrote, and it was a big hit.
Yeah, it was theatrically a
But he had also written stuff
hit.
like Class of 1984 or 86 or
yeah.
I
So
forget which one.
he was respected as a screenwriter, but not so much as a director. So this was his directorial kind
Debut.
of debut. Yeah.
But he'd been like an actor before. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us what this movie's all about. Set the
The-
stage.
Basically, Charlie Brewster is the boy next door. Jerry Dandridge moves in next door to him.
To an overly creepy house.
To a very creepy house, yeah. So Jerry is the vampire. Charlie is the boy next door. Charlie is he's a fan of this
TV show.
TV show.
In
yeah,
movie.
Local cable
It's a
access.
local cable access.
Was this a real show in the 80s also?
No, but it's based on kind of like the USA Up All
Yeah,
Night.
like Vampirella.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So it's called Fright Night, and he's a big fan of this movie. So
Yes.
he's got vampires on the brain already.
yes.
And he starts seeing some suspicious activity from his neighbor.
Yeah, so Peter Vincent is the host of this like Friday night, we hunt vampires. I'm the great vampire killer.
Peter Cushing.
Peter Vincent.
Yeah, Peter Vincent is the character in the movie. He's kind of going off of what Peter Cushing.
It's like a amalgamation of Peter Cushing and Vincent Price.
Yeah. So Charlie has grown up on this Friday night vampire series, and he's just having a night in his room with his girlfriend Amy, and all of a sudden he sees that the next door neighbor is moving in, and he sees that like things aren't
They're
normal.
bringing a coffin in.
Yeah,
Which kinda
things are not normal suburbs behavior. He sees some strange happenings, and he sees a coffin, and he sees a hooker get murdered, and maybe that's like kind of cuckoo crazy in the neighborhood of where they are. And finally, Charlie decides that like his neighbor is a vampire, and he's got to kill him.
and that hijinks ensue.
Hijinks ensue.
Lots of hijinks.
Lots of hijinks. Okay, so what made you pick this movie? Because I know you said you had a ton of movies on the plate.
I
and you had to
did.
narrow it down.
I really did.
What is it about this one that separates it from the others?
So originally, I think I went from 12 to 9 to 6 to 3.
Wow.
And I don't remember what order that went in. But yeah, so
what is it about this one?
well, I really wanted to get into the genre within the genre
Yeah,
of
like you chose
vampire
all
movies.
three of these based off of like they represent different genres within the vampire genre.
Kind of, and also, I mean, it was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of genre within the genre versus what I just like and also love. But like, I really wanted to get into the sexy vampire versus the monster vampire versus the rules of vampirism within the genre. I just wanted to talk about it.
Okay, cool. This is my first time watching this movie.
I assumed.
And I didn't like Amy right off the bat.
Yeah, well,
I thought
no
she
one
was-
does.
Did you recognize her?
I did not.
She was Marcy from Married with Children.
Yeah.
The next door neighbor.
Oh, I never watched that show.
I keep forgetting how young you are. like you just came out of the womb two weeks ago.
That was not a show that I watched. No, I
Great
just
show.
I didn't really like her. I didn't really buy the relationship. Obviously, he was kind of like the distracted boyfriend who he was preoccupied with sex, but also kind of just like, well, whatever. There was a disconnect there, which I think
Typical
was
teenage boy.
Yeah, it was on purpose.
Well,
And I understood it, but
I bought it. It was the 80s.
Yeah, I bought it as far as that whole thing went. But then when they kept dragging that relationship on throughout and she was chasing him and then he was chasing her back and forth, I was kind of like, do they even like each other? I don't really get it.
Well, I felt that was very respective of the time of when, in that time of the 80s, like when a woman is like, that's my boyfriend and my whole life is wrapped around my boyfriend. I just dedicate my life to whatever he says is important. And I believed in it.
The hamburger in the face.
Yeah. And she
me.
was like, when he didn't abide by the rules that she abided by. I bought that.
Like I got what this was going for. A lot of the characters were very unlikable to me. The main character guy, what's his name? Charlie. Kind of just generic. I didn't really think that he brought anything in particular to the role. His best friend, Evil,
Love him.
was a dirtbag.
I love Evil.
The character was actually named Evil Ed.
Yes.
Yeah, Evil Ed. And I could not stand him.
Evil is the best.
No, he's the worst. Literally the person that I would never hang out with.
His dinner is in the oven.
It's so overacted, this entire thing. It was obnoxious. I couldn't stand it. I was happy when he went full vampire, because spoiler alert, we're going to spoil all these movies. He got turned into a vampire more towards the end of the movie.
They were written in the 80s and released in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, if you haven't watched them,
people like me who's never seen it before, spoiler alert. I was like, his acting in the second half of the movie fit more. But it was consistent. Like he was over the top, crazy, weird, kind of eerie. Like this dude's a freak. Like I think I texted Kate or something. Like I'm pretty sure Evil Ed has killed small animals in his backyard. Like the dude's a freak. And his acting was so over the top. And then once he became a vampire, then it fit. Like his character made sense. And I was like, okay. I felt like it was like he should have toned it down a little bit more towards the beginning, and then at the end, go the psycho crazy.
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory on that is that the character, Evil Ed, the actor, Stephen Jeffries, is that his name? Okay, I don't know what his name is. I think that's close. I'll look it up later. But the actor portrayed by that was acting Evil Ed. So he was not used to playing a character that was strange, and this was like a first for him. So it took him a little amping up to get to the character of Evil Ed, and the director the director Tom Holland was just like, I want you to think of the most outside the box character because this is really important for this character. And finally the actor was just like, okay, I'm just going to do this really super fucking weird thing. And the director was like, yeah, do more of that. and when he like cackled that,
Yeah.
you're so cool, Brewster. And that was like pinnacle of his character. And that's what they used as the closing credit. And then that's what they used for the sequel to Fright Night.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the actor who played Evil Ed, he originally thought he was auditioning for the part of Charlie, which is the main character. Yeah. And he was kind of coming off of, a movie where he was the lead actor. It was like some type of like teen sex comedy or something like that. And he was like, like I'm a leading man, And so he was very insulted that they wanted him for this supporting role.
Really?
Yeah.
He wasn't insulted. He was surprised.
Well, he was kind of insulted.
He had just come off of a role like as the leading man with Amanda Bears.
So like he kind of wanted.
They just kind of
wanted to keep that train going.
Yeah,
he assumed.
Yeah, like he wanted to be the lead in the movie. Yeah. And so when he found out that you're going to be playing this quirky sidekick character, he was just kind of like, well, okay. So he was kind of trepidatious about his performance.
Yeah. Well, you can't say he phoned it in. I mean, you can see there's some effort behind it, but I just felt like it was kind of misplaced at the beginning. Well, made more sense at the end.
Funny enough, so Tom Holland, he's got like a background in theater, and you wouldn't think it because he's known for these like schlocky horror movies that he's kind of carved a niche out of for himself in. But he like had like he'd been in a couple movies himself as an actor, and so he had like this acting background. And when he finalized his cast for this movie, like he actually had the luxury of having like 2 weeks of rehearsal time with these guys. And so he had them actually write out like detailed backstories for each one of their characters, even though like you don't really see a whole lot of that in the finished film. Like these actors kind of like actually spent time doing their homework and immersing themselves in these characters and coming up with all types of interesting character traits and things that weren't in the script. And it really kind of made the characters like a lot more interesting than I think that they probably would have been had they not had the time to do this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Jude and I watched a 3.5 hour documentary
God, what
on
dedication.
this movie.
There's no way I would have done
Called "You're So Cool, Brewster." If you want to check it out, it was a
Yeah.
Kickstarted documentary, and it's very detailed on the making of this movie. But one of the more interesting things about it was Chris Sheridan, Humperdinck.
Humperdinck.
So like he plays the evil vampire in the movie,
steals the show.
and his whole thing was that he wanted to play the vampire not as like pure evil. He wanted him like, okay, like he's still got these human traits to him.
Yeah, he wanted him to have depth.
Yeah. And like he came up with this interesting backstory where it's like, he theorized that vampires all descended from bats. Like the first vampire was bitten by a bat at some point and they became a vampire through that bite. And so like he's got bat DNA in him. And throughout the movie, he's like eating these like apples. And I'd actually never seen this movie before either.
Really?
Yeah, this was my first time watching it.
Wow.
And when we were watching it, I kept turning to June. I was like, "Why is a vampire eating an apple?"
Yeah.
Because I'm just used to the whole like vampires can't eat like real
Human
type
food thing. Yeah, from Shadows.
And so Chris Sheridan,
Sarandon.
I'm sorry, Chris Sarandon, in creating this this character, he was like, he had this notion that vampires descended from bats, and 90% of bats out there are like fruit bats.
Yeah.
And so he was like, well, naturally vampires would eat fruit. And so like he came up with this concept where in between feeding on humans, he would eat apples to like cleanse his palate
Between murders
because of the bat DNA.
Yeah. And when you're watching the movie, you don't really get
No,
it. But then
I
when you put that perspective in, you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
He's cleansing his palate before he just murders another person. It's sick and a little bit sexy.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's some nice, put some effort into this
Yeah.
character. I like it. Like I said,
Yeah.
I think he stole the show. Like he made the movie for me. The other characters take
Such good casting.
I feel like you could change out any of the other characters.
You know what though? Like Peter Vincent, that character, I feel like is very iconic as well. Like I feel like the three characters that really stand out in this movie are, of course, the vampire, Peter Vincent, and Evil Ed. Like those three are just like so, like kind of original.
Very unique.
Unique in their kind of creation.
Each of those actors just gave so much towards their character that wasn't written into their character.
I'm gonna retract what I said a little bit. Charlie and his girlfriend, was it Amy? Amy. Okay, those two, I felt like they were kind of generic. Like you could have put anybody in those roles.
I think like they were meant to be that way though.
Maybe it could have been
because
like,
I know that
you're
Tom
supposed to-
Holland wanted Amy to be like the typical girl next door.
Yeah.
And Charlie was supposed to be like just this like kind of bland nerd type guy.
Yeah. Evil Ed was very, very unique, but he was a little bit over the top for me. I'm not saying he was a bad character. For me, I was kind of like, every time he was on scene, I couldn't wait for him to get off screen.
Well, when the script was originally written, it was just Charlie and Evil Ed and Peter Vincent, and Amy wasn't even in the script. And then the director / writer went back and was like, there's no girl in this. We need to make it sexier. So we need to add Amy. So that's when Amy kind of came in. So he had to incorporate Amy in everything. Tom Holland incorporated Amy just to make it sexier.
It paid off at the end.
Yeah.
Because the whole, the damsel in distress, like she's turning into a vampire. We have to get to, save her before dawn or whatever. Like it put some extra stakes into the movie. So I kind of appreciated that. But in the beginning, I didn't really care for their relationship. I wasn't really sold on it. I wanted to see more Humperdinck. Like I was like, screw the rest of these people.
We need more Humperdinck in this movie.
Show me more Humperdinck. He's the man I want to watch. And I
remember that time in Time Cop.
And I was super excited that they portrayed him in such a cool way when that first vampire attack comes when he's at Charlie's house, and Charlie's all like freaked out. He's got garlic around his windows and he's nailed his windows shut, and Humperdinck just comes in and just like There's not a care in the world. He rips
Listen.
open the window. He's like, you never invite a vampire into your house. It renders
Humperdinck
everything.
was not Humperdinck
Freaking sexy
until
in this
2
movie.
years after this movie, sir.
Yeah, he was Dandridge before he was Humperdinck.
Yeah.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah,
But
technically.
funny enough,
he was Dandridge.
like Chris Sarandon. So he was the husband of Susan Sarandon at this time.
Okay.
Famous actress Susan Sarandon. And through him, she kind of got her big break. And so she started her career under his name. And after they divorced, she just kept his name.
Stage name.
Because that was like what she was known as, basically. So like he's got kind of a pedigree, you know. Well,
He's good. He was good in this movie.
He was good.
Like, Princess Bride is a classic, but it's very campy on purpose.
Yes.
And he plays into that campiness. And I've never seen him in any other movie. Like, literally, that's the only movie I know him from is Princess Bride. When I
But-
saw him in this movie, and I was like, oh,
He has some sex appeal.
this dude's got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like throughout, you know that vampires are evil, but when he has like the one-on-one with you, you're like, yeah, I'm
I
gonna
might be on your team.
maybe.
Yeah, he was like, I don't want to kill you, Charlie.
Tell me more about being a vampire.
Well, like
I like that he gave him like a ultimatum.
Well,
Yeah.
the whole scene where he turns
Yeah.
Evil Ed into a vampire, it's like
so
it's actually very tender,
delicate.
It's like Ed is kind of like this outcast miscreant.
Yeah.
Like no one at school really likes him, and once Dandridge kind of corners him, he's just like, hey, take my hand. You don't have to be scared anymore. Like I'll
that
show
scene.
you I'll show you a kind of understanding
Take
that
your hand
you've
right
never
now,
had.
Kadish.
Yeah, I'll give you the power to give you the confidence.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is.
Yeah.
This confidence that he personifies.
Like, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You don't have to worry about
I think he was the
being
good guy in
you
this movie.
anymore. Yeah.
Aside from all the
Like,
murder,
just take,
Just hookers.
take my hand and I will protect you and we'll be immortal forever.
so
And all you have to do
I just
is
wanna-
not
Hold on,
fight
she's got
me.
a thing. She's got a thing going on.
I just want to clear something up. So murder's okay as long as it's murdering hookers.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Don't say that.
All right, I just wanted to clear that up.
I would never murder a hooker, sir.
They're doing the Lord's work. Anyway,
Just eat an apple in between.
yeah.
So good.
Cleanse your palate.
Cleanse your palate.
So I've got
I'm gonna
some.
do that. I'm gonna obnoxiously eat an apple, and my wife's gonna be like, "What are you doing?" I'm cleansing my
Well, I
palate.
had a hooker earlier. So.
just murdered a hooker earlier. Got to cleanse the palate.
This is my family apple for you.
Anyway, what else we got about this movie?
So I got some factoids
All right, go for it.
to share. So Fright Night was filmed on the same Hollywood backlot as the 1989 Tom Hanks movie The Burbs.
Okay, never seen that movie either.
Well,
I am not a product of
I
the
have
70s.
feelings about that.
that was 80s.
I know, but you had to be born in the 70s to understand.
So, regardless, the movie starts off like in suburbia, and that was kind of like a big thing because at the time this movie was made, horror movies were kind of on the wane, like especially vampire movies. And so Tom Holland, he starts off the movie by showing like basically a suburban household.
yeah.
But you have this voiceover where it's like this very melodramatic, like horror movie dialogue. And as the camera kind of pushes into Charlie's room, you realize that the dialogue is all on this bad TV show. And so it's kind of playing with expectations a little bit there. And I just thought that this suburb backlot set, it's kind of iconic. So like you see it in like a lot of different movies. But director Tom Holland, he was also the creator of Child's Play.
Yeah.
Which is quite a famous horror movie franchise. One of the funny things is Amanda Beer's character, Amy. So like their whole thing was like they wanted her to be very kind of sweet and innocent at the beginning. And then when she gets bitten and is transitioning into a vampire, they wanted to kind of like sex her up, make her like
They put her in that white.
accelerate her transformation into a quote unquote woman.
Yeah. It starts at their kind of like dance off.
Oh, yeah.
And-
the hypnotizing in this movie was on point.
Yeah, the thrall.
Yeah.
But to kind of signify this transition, they actually made like a prosthetic breastplate for her.
They did.
That
They made her
enhanced
fake
her
boobs.
cleavage. so like they made her boobs like way bigger on this
course they
breastplate. So like they
her hair was longer too, right?
well, that was a wig.
No, obviously. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
like,
But they put this like kind of like fake chest on her, and so like her boobies are a lot bigger, and she actually kept it after the movie was over.
Did she really?
She kept it for 20 years, and then she auctioned it off.
Wow.
At a Comic-Con, yeah.
Hey, where's the boobs button?
Boobs.
There you go.
Thank you,
miss
Mr.
you,
Vader.
Vader.
Thanks, Vader.
I'm very grumpy.
So now there's a scene in here where Evil Ed transforms into a wolf.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting because you don't usually you get the lycans and the vampires are like more against each other. You kind of there's a myth about vampires and wolves that existed a long time ago that you don't really see in
traditional vampire lore. Vampires are shapeshifters. They're not just bats. They can shift into mist. They can shift into wolves and all this stuff. And
there's also a other lore where there's vampires who are just vampires and also humans. And then there's the lore of the vampire versus I can turn into a bat. And then there's the lore of the vampire who can turn into wolves. And then there's the lore of vampires who can turn into whatever they want. And then there's the lore of wares who can turn into other things. There's just so many different genres within the genre, which is what I kind of wanted to talk about when we got into Vampire Week, but it's just so impossible to do in 1 week.
Yeah. There's so much lore behind this.
So much.
It's so fun.
So Stephen Jeffries, it was kind of funny because when Jude and I were watching the 3.5-hour documentary on this thing,
it was very long.
Yeah,
it felt more like 5.5 hours, but
like they dedicated like a whole hour to just the special effects guys who were working on this.
Oh,
movie.
The special effects were on point in this movie. Well, for a $9 million budget, it was better than freaking Monster Squad.
Well, interestingly enough,
no offense, Stan Winston.
So this movie is the only vampire movie to spend like upwards of $1 million on effects at the time. So like they spent like a huge chunk of their budget just on vampire effects.
It paid off.
But the guys who did the vampire effects were the same special effects crew that had just worked on Ghostbusters. And so for this big budget Ghostbusters movie, these guys kind of like made all their mistakes. And so by the time they got to
it's kind of streamlined by the time they got to Fright Night.
They kind of knew what they were doing.
Nice.
And it was funny because in the documentary, they were interviewing like one of these guys who was like in charge of like creating the prosthetics and stuff. And he was like, yeah, we were just doing a lot of cocaine at the time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Like he just flat out said like, yeah, we were doing cocaine. And like they cut to this other guy. He's like, yeah, I walked in on that guy one time and he was banging this girl right on like the prosthetics table. And the entire room smelled like formaldehyde.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've ever been a cocaine user, you understand.
Okay, listeners.
Yeah. You're just like, yeah, that checks out.
But when they got to the part about Stephen Jeffries, like there's a whole scene in here where basically Stephen Jeffries transforms into a werewolf, and then he goes back to his like human form from being a werewolf. And they were kind of like these special effects guys kind of wanted to show off and do this very elaborate scene where like we see him slowly transition from his wolf form and back into, his boy form.
Yeah.
And he had to spend 18 hours in makeup. Like it was ridiculous. Like how long? Like that's over a day of work. Yeah. So like
they gave him a pill to help him sleep while he was in the chair, so that they could keep working on him. So that he could just like sleep through part of it.
Wow.
Yeah, they literally drugged him so that they could like do part of their work, and then he would wake up and just be like, okay, how much longer? And it would be like 8 hours longer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And like in the documentary, like he's just you can see like he's like I don't know, when was this 85 87 and it's what 2020 now, and he's just like so fucking over it. and like in the documentary he's like, all right, fine, this is the last time I'm gonna talk about this.
Really?
And he's like and then like at the end of the documentary he's like, this is the last time I'm going to do this ever. It was like, ha, 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 you're so cool, Brewster. And he was like, I'm done now. I'm done talking about this for life.
He's kind of like
so over it. He was traumatized. He sat in a makeup chair for 18 hours a day for weeks.
Wow.
To do, I don't know, 30 minutes. And the contacts, they like this was the time, and this was the 80s. Like contacts were not what they are now.
Made out of glass and shit.
And if you watch this movie and you see that their eyes, that was not digital. This was like glass contacts that these actors had to put in their eyes, and I mean glass.
Yeah.
And these actors had to put them in their eyes, and this was like shit that the arts crew had to like develop, and they're not optometrists. They like glass blue like designs onto a piece of glass and then put it in an actor's eye, and it wasn't okay. And these people had like eye problems, and there's one point in the documentary where I forget what actor it was. I think it was Evil Ed. Or no, it was Amy, and she was like, I put the contacts in, and I only had to be in them for like the one shoot, and I kept my eyes closed, and then every time I opened them, I was like, something is not okay. But I just kept going with it because the scene was important. And finally I got to the end of the scene, and she was like, yeah, there's something very wrong. And it did damage on my eyes because someone forgot to sand down the inside of the contact for it to be on my eye.
It's all bumpy and messed up.
Yeah, it was literally like
glass shards and
someone
stuff.
just painted the inside and forgot to sand it down. And there's no CGI in this movie. It's all just like, here, deal with this.
Yeah, it's all like the 80s practical effects.
Yeah.
And
so it's like I just give so much props to the actors that were in each of these scenes that had to deal with this shit, and it's just so magical.
And it's really funny because like the prosthetic special effects guy who was doing all the cocaine, like there are lots of scenes in this where they're playing around with like melting puppets and stuff. At the end when Dandridge is basically exploding. So basically, they used a leftover puppet of the librarian from Ghostbusters as like his bat form with like the long arms and stuff, and they had this thing where they were he was basically melting, like his skin was melting off, and so in order to do that, they had to like pour this acid on the puppet thing that would melt the gelatin, and in order to like when the shot was done, in order to stop the acid, they had to like pour this like base on it to counteract it.
A neutral.
And the cocaine guy was just he was just dousing this stuff, and then like when he went home for the night, cocaine guy his like feet were numb. He's like, what the hell's going on? He looked down, and he had gotten so much of this base kind of splashed onto his shoes that his shoes had melted off.
Yeah.
And it was just like
that's a real thing. I deal with chemicals. That's a real thing.
So like it was just
that will happen with.
It was a very unsafe working environment on this movie.
I do have to give it props for the ending scene. That ending fight scene was legit. Like it was really good, really well done, really exciting.
Yeah,
I was thrilled to watch that part, and I love the practical effects, the melting. I wanted to specifically talk about that because when I saw it, I was like, "That's freaking like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like quality melting face thing." Like it was perfect. I loved it, and the bat flying around when he transformed, and then Humperdinck doing his thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the prosthetic fingers, the Nosferatu long fingernail thing.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I
so
thought they pulled it off great. It didn't look fake at all. It looked.
Chris Sarandon had to do that himself because he was so bored sitting in the makeup chair for so long. He was like, "You guys have to give me something to do." He was
in there for like 8 hours a day.
Yeah. So the makeup team were like, "Okay, well maybe you can just do your fingers while we work on your face." So while they were working on his face for 8 hours, Chris Sarandon did his own fingers. Yeah, his own hands.
That's a nice little nugget.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of funny because the whole genesis behind this movie was that writer-director Tom Holland, he kind of had this idea of the boy who cried wolf. And he was like, what if this guy knows his, next door neighbor is a vampire and nobody believes him?
Yeah.
And so he kind of had this idea, but he couldn't go anywhere with it. He's like, well, what do you do if you call the cops? Like, they're just not going to believe you. And so then like a friend of his suggested that, well, maybe he, tells a Vincent Price type TV host about it, and they team up to kill the vampires. And Tom Holland was like, that's the movie right there. And so like once he had that concept, he kind of like latched onto it, and he developed the script specifically for him to direct. And it was because that he'd had like such a bad experience with, previous movies of like scripts of his, like kind of getting, mishandled, that he really wanted to, take this story and show what he could do with it. And so at the time, the studio was kind of dealing with other more important movies, and so they're like, oh, this guy wants what, $9 million to make a horror movie? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, they wanted to offer him more to not direct it, and he was like, absolutely not. I'm directing this.
Good for him.
yeah. So basically, he gets it, and one of the big casting was Chris Sarandon. Sorry, Chris Sarandon as Jerry Dandridge, and it was really interesting because Chris Sarandon originally didn't want to do it. He's like, it's a schlocky horror movie. It's like, I want to be a serious actor. I want to do this stuff. Yeah.
Chris Sarandon was like a respected actor at the time.
Yeah, like I think he'd gotten some type of award nomination.
And I think he was doing like
Theater.
Broadway. Yeah. So he was
like
he was a respected actor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so originally he didn't want to do it, but he agreed to meet with Tom Holland. And when he met with Tom Holland, he was so impressed because Tom Holland said, like, okay, look, I know that you think this is a schlocky horror movie.
Yeah.
But at its core, this movie is about an older man trying to steal a younger man's woman. and when Chris Sarandon heard that, he was like, oh, I get it.
So in the documentary, so Chris Sarandon said, like, I didn't want to do this, but they sent me the script and I read it because I'm a professional, so I read the scripts that are sent to me. And he said that within 10 seconds.
10 seconds?
10 seconds, he was invested in the script. He was like, I was still kind of like, oh, this is a schlocky horror movie. So, but I'm like, this is a really good read.
In 10 seconds?
10 seconds, he said. So he said,
that's enough time to read the title.
Right. He said, he was like, so I want to meet with the writer of this. I just want to meet with him. And he said in that meeting, Tom Holland made him see the movie. That Tom Holland is a writer that makes you not just read his words, but makes you see his view.
Yeah.
And he said in that meeting, he was just like, snap, like, I'm in, call my manager, call whoever you need to call. I'm in.
Wow.
And it was interesting because this movie was actually a very collaborative process. The actors would constantly kind of give Holland their ideas, and he'd be like, oh, those are good. So the idea that in the movie, the character of Amy looks just like one of Sheridan's lost love from like hundreds of years prior. And that was actually Chris Sheridan's idea, where he was like, what if this girl...
Please start saying his name right.
I'm trying. Me and names, I'm a face person.
Just say Humperdinck.
Yeah, Humperdinck. All right. So basically, Humperdinck came up with the idea that Amy was Dandridge's like kind of like reincarnated lost love. And Holland was like, "Oh, that's great! And that gives him motivation to pursue her."
He came up with the backstory
a painting of her in his house.
Yeah.
And he looks at it, and then he sees Amy, and he's like, "It's you." Yeah.
And he came up with the backstory of the apple thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only one who did that. Like every actor in the movie kind of contributed to the story as they were shooting. And Roddy McDowell, who played Peter Vincent in the movie, he had worked with Tom Holland previously on Class of 1986, I think it was, or 1984.
84, I think.
I forget.
It was. Yeah,
it's one of those two. And so originally, Tom Holland had wanted Vincent Price to play the role because he based it on Vincent Price.
Yeah.
But at the time, Price had been kind of like really heavily typecast as like, that horror movie guy, and his health was kind of in decline. And so he decided that he just wasn't taking any roles anymore. And so when he cast Roddy McDowell, everything kind of fell into place for that character, because Roddy McDowell came in and he's like, I'm going to play this like the Cowardly Lion from Wizard of Oz. And so like his performance, you can kind of see like he's just like this nervous, like,
That was one of my questions when they first meet him, when Charlie goes to see him. He says that he believes in vampires and then he is who he says he is. He's just, the TV show is just a side thing to pay bills, basically. But then later on, it kind of suggests that it was all just a farce and he's not really a vampire killer. He's just an actor. And I could never really pinpoint which one it was. Is he an actor?
Yeah, he's an actor.
Or is he an actual vampire killer who just plays a vampire killer on TV?
He's an actor who plays a vampire killer, but ultimately he's struggling for a reason to be and decides that the character that he has played is who he wants to be.
Huh. I did like the fact that Humperdinck kept challenging him, like, you don't have faith in that cross of yours. That's why it doesn't work.
I love that scene
Yeah.
where he like presents the cross and he's like, "Get back, demon of hell," or whatever he says. and Chris Sarandon just like starts laughing in his face. And he's like, "You have to have faith."
Yeah.
And
That was
just
good.
challenges
That was a
it.
nice little.
I love that.
There's a couple of loopholes, like vampire loopholes, that they use in this movie. I thought was really well done.
Yeah.
Like being invited into the home changes the whole dynamic about what works and what doesn't.
So
having faith in the cross, whether that affects the vampire or not, you have to. I love that they kind of incorporated all these little minute details about vampirism in there.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about when we were doing Vampire Week was like the different genres within the genres within the genres of vampires. Is like there's just like so many rules when it comes to vampires. There's they have to be invited in versus that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Versus the wooden stake through the heart versus that doesn't matter. Like there's just so many like rules in the genre of vampires that I just kind of wanted to get into and talk about. And
well, we've been talking about Fright Night for about an hour, so let's go to the next movie.
Yeah, let's go on. Let's move
on to the next movie, which is Lost Boys. Correct? We're doing it by year. So Lost Boys. Okay, this is another movie that I hadn't seen. So who wants to set
I'm very excited to get your first take of these movies that you haven't seen before.
Okay, cool.
So ultimately, what was your first take on Fright Night?
It was classic cheesy 80s. However, the elements that mattered were really well done.
Yeah.
Humperdinck's acting, the prosthetics, the way it was shot, the way it was lit, the surprise, the loopholes, like all that stuff that matters in this movie that makes it exciting and fun was really well done. The 80s schlocky kind of comedy, boy meets girl kind of thing. Whatever. We'll leave it there. But everything else was really good.
Yeah, I felt like Fright Night was not a very good movie.
How dare you, sir?
I can appreciate it knowing like all the behind the scenes stuff that went into it and, the labor of love that the filmmakers had for this movie. Like technically, like the special effects in this movie are like freaking amazing.
Yeah, they hold up
for their time.
Yeah,
the performances of particularly Humperdinck were like really good, and the concepts behind it, like the whole art direction and stuff like that, was fun. And in fact, I don't know if you ever watched the remake with Anton Yelchin,
the 2011 movie.
Yeah,
no, I saw it on the list. I didn't get a chance to watch it though.
Well, I mean, it's.
Is it the same, or is it like a continuation?
They kind of take the premise of it, but they miss the heart of this film. And but overall, like I'd probably give the movie like 2.5 stars or something like that, just because I felt like it was a decent enough film, but it wasn't something that I was like blown away by.
Yeah. What about Jude? Final thoughts. I forgot. Matt's.
I know. It
Vader's
throws
not here.
everything off.
It throws my whole.
Well, here's what Vader thought of the movie.
The movie's stupid.
No.
No, he would like this movie.
He liked it.
Anyway, my whole my whole like dynamic for what I do for the show to keep everything on track is completely off kilter today because I don't have my fourth person. But final thoughts, Jude. We gave our final thoughts. What's your final thoughts?
I mean, this is one of my top 3 vampire picks, so obviously I give it an A+.
Yeah.
But Kadish, I think probably you have more to say because I think I've been talking for a while.
Oh no, we're done. We're done with this one.
I did have a lot more to say.
We got to move
Sure.
on.
I'm sure.
It's been an hour.
Maybe a Patreon episode of just Kadish talking.
I do all these research and I write out notes for you guys, and you're just like, I'm gonna drink, and this movie was.
I hate everything.
All right.
He was like, Vader's not going to be here. It's my time to shine.
I don't even know why I show up anymore, to tell you the truth.
Do less. Do less.
Okay.
We're moving on. We're moving on, people.
Okay,
moving
okay.
on. We're doing Lost Boys,
All right.
which happens to be today, the day that we're recording this, is the 33-year anniversary of this film. Jude, did you do that on purpose?
No.
Yes, she did. Just say yes, Jude.
Yes. Is today the 30th?
Today is the 33-year anniversary. I saw it on Twitter today.
Yeah. Oh.
There's a big old post from some big verified account saying, "Happy anniversary, Lost Boys, 33 years."
Oh,
So good job.
makes my heart all aflutter.
There you go. All right, so who wants to set the stage for Lost Boys? Real quick, you don't have to get super deep into it. Jude, take it away. Go ahead.
The synopsis is, so this was released July 31st, 1987. The budget was $8.3 million. Its gross was 32 and some change million. It was directed by Joel Schumacher. It stars Jason Patrick, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland, and Corey Feldman.
You can't forget Alex Winters either.
Bill S. Preston, Esquire.
Bill Vampire.
Right. Yes, the Bill Vampire. Okay, the synopsis is a mother and her two sons move to a small coast town in California. The town is plagued by bikers and mysterious deaths. She has two sons. The younger son is, he makes friends with two other boys in town who claim to be vampire hunters. The older son, he starts sleeping days and nights, and he kind of like stays out all night, and he makes friends with like kind of this biker gang, and he just kind of gets obsessed with this girl named Star.
Your parents were ex-hippies too, huh?
Yeah.
As a first-time viewer of this film, which I know is probably a cardinal sin in the movie film industry of people who talk about movies, I've never seen Lost Boys, and it's always been that kind of thing where I'm like, everybody loves it. It was in the 80s. It's got Kiefer Sutherland in it. I love him. He's super cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever wanted to watch this movie because I knew that the perception of it was better than what I would actually think of it. So like when everybody's like, "Oh, I love Lost Boys, such a great 80s vampire movie." I'm like, "All right, cool. I'll take your word for it." Because I don't want to watch it. Because if I do, it's going to ruin it for me. And it did. This movie. Oh my God.
You're welcome.
Where do I even start? I'm going to start with Corey Feldman. That's who I'm going to start with because immediately.
You need to leave him alone.
He's
been through a lot.
I understand that and I respect him for the fight that he's taken on. I get it. I'm not talking about that right now.
The next 45 minutes of this podcast will be white noise. I mean, unethical, unracial noise.
Okay, Jude.
I'm very grumpy.
It will be beige,
right now?
beige noise.
Corey Feldman's like, "I'm a big man" voice. Like it was super weird.
You ever been with a big man?
You ever been with a big man? Like the whole time in this movie, he was trying to act like he was like 10 years older than he was.
There's a reason for that.
It's
though.
super weird, and it did not come off very well at all. It was
So
dumb.
Just let Kadish go.
that was not.
He didn't get to
fault.
talk at all for the first movie. Just let him go.
You ever been to San Carla? We got vampires here, man.
You ever been to a big San Carlo?
Like this voice is coming out of like a 12-year-old, and it's so bad.
So originally he was just using his normal voice when he was performing in this movie, but Joel Schumacher,
of course, Schumacher.
Yeah, Schumacher came in and his exact words were, "Corey, I want you to butch up your voice a bit."
Oh.
And Corey was like, "What do you mean by that?" And Joel Schumacher said, "I want you to go to the video store and watch Rambo and Chuck Norris movies, and I want you to act like them." And so
Then cast an older person.
Corey Feldman, Corey Feldman was already cast by the time Schumacher came on board. But Corey Feldman, basically, he's doing an impression of Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris in this movie. And that's why his voice sounds the way he does.
It's terrible. It's awful.
Well, blame Joel Schumacher.
I
for
do
that.
blame Joel Schumacher.
Don't blame Corey Feldman.
It's so bad. It's so bad, and it distracts
It's not
me.
bad, though.
It's terrible, and it distracts me so much from the rest of the movie. And I'm the whole time.
He's like such a minor character.
It doesn't. No, he's a huge character. He's the one who drives the whole story to where like the vampires are, and let's go kill the vampires. And I know how to do it. Like him and his little buddy,
The Frog Brothers.
the freaking Goonies Light, are like, or the Monster Squad Light, are like, "Hey, let's go kill some vampires. We know what we're doing." And the whole time they're just bumbling idiots.
Well, it's funny, Alex, because originally this movie was pitched as Goonies with vampires.
Of course, it was.
And it was supposed to be like younger kids, kind of like sixth graders fighting ninth grade vampires. And Richard Donner, the director of Goonies, was actually originally attached to direct, and eventually he backed out to go and do Lethal Weapon. And so when Joel Schumacher came on, he was like, "I don't want to do these young kids think I want to make it sexier, and so like he aged up the kids and he
That's fine.
basically said I wanted to teenage this movie.
Yeah, everybody else works. The older brother, the star, she was a pretty famous actress. I recognized her when I saw her.
Jamie Gertz.
Yeah. And then Keith Sutherland. Like that whole crew, Alex Winters, that whole age group, that whole thing worked for me. I was like, I bought every single one of them. I bought their performances, and I bought the idea that their whole dynamic was going on. I'm like, I'm in for that. But when they introduced, what's the main brother, the vampire brother? Michael. When they introduced Michael's brother, his younger brother is kind of the one who has to take the fight to the vampires for whatever reason. That completely cut the legs out from underneath this movie. I was like, I do not believe for 1 second that this idiot kid is going to go and take down some like 18, 19-year-old vampires in a group of motorcycle gang orgy. I didn't buy it. And then Corey Feldman comes in with his Rambo voice, and it just ruins the entire film for me. And I couldn't, when they went and they finally got to the vampire lair and they go in there and they kill Bill the vampire, and I'm like, okay, are they going to do this? No, of course not. They're going to scream and run away like a bunch of little pussies. I was like, this is why you don't cast kids in your freaking movies. Like if Corey Feldman would have been like 17, 18, same age as Michael, maybe a little bit younger, and had done that same thing, but had like stayed true and had some guts, then it would have been an interesting movie. But no, they ran away like a bunch of little pussies, and they're punks. And I hate kids in movies. It ruins everything.
Fun fact, the name Michael is said in this movie 118 times. It averages out to one Michael per minute of screen time.
Am I wrong that these dumb kids ruined this movie?
You are wrong.
This is awful.
Yeah, you're wrong.
No, I am.
You're wrong.
Whatever. All right, tell me what why'd you like.
You didn't like Goonies. You didn't like Monster Squad. It's no surprise you didn't like this
Kids
movie.
are freaking stupid.
You just don't like children.
Kids who outsmart and outwit and outstrength, apparently, like legit vampires.
I can't wait to see the therapy bills for your children. Daddy hates us.
No, I just make sure that they don't think they're smarter than me, and they're fine.
Again, therapy bills. Daddy, why aren't we as smart as you?
You can't outsmart me. You're not going to get that extra piece of cake.
Yeah, typical fathers want their kids to be better than them.
Yeah. I'm raising
not
my children to not be smarter than me.
No, I'm sorry, but
I'm keeping them dumb.
Like these young kids that like decide to go and murder this motorcycle gang of vampires, I didn't buy it. Everything else, Michael's whole storyline, I thought was really interesting. His love interest with Star, his conflicting like I'm a vampire now, but I don't want to murder people. Like I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then the big reveal at the end that the father was like the ultimate like Dracula vampire guy who was leading the whole crew. Good twist. Great twist.
I thought that was the most interesting part of the whole story was that Max had been a vampire for who knows how long, and he had made other vampires, and ultimately what he wanted was a family, and what he was lacking was his partner. He had his sons, and what he needed for them was a mom.
Wait, is Max the good guy to you?
Jude's like ashamed to admit it.
She's like squirming in her chair.
I get it.
He's not the good guy.
Honestly, Max, show me a ring. I'll marry you.
Everything.
I'll be your vampire bride.
It's all I've ever wanted is to be a vampire.
I like everything else about this movie worked.
I don't want to get older.
Everything about this movie worked for me, except for the damn kids. They ruined the entire thing for me. I couldn't watch it. At the end, I was like,
except for all the characters in the movie.
They're not as a vampire partner.
It's literally just like 3 or 4 characters, but there happen to be the ones that like drive the action. And I'm like, this is so dumb. You have a much better character in Michael, and he spends half the movie like, I can't. I'm ashamed. Oh, I can't do it. I'm so tired.
Well, the actual person of Michael, Jason Patric, never wanted to be a famous movie star. So that might have had something to do with it.
I don't know. Like Keith Sutherland, Alex Winters, like that whole motorcycle gang crew was really cool.
Keith Sutherland, come for me.
That mullet, that bleach blonde mullet, man.
I'll eat it for dinner.
God, so weird. Yeah, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but the kids ruined this movie. 100%. It's terrible. I give it a 1 star. This is a 1-star crap fest. Where's that soundbite, Kadish?
I couldn't fit it on the soundboard.
Everything.
I hate everything.
The movie's stupid.
It is so stupid.
It is not a 1-star crap fest.
right.
I love this movie.
Okay, well, tell me what you love about it besides the weird man crush you have on Max.
Honestly,
Well, what other type of crush is she going to have?
I don't know.
I have so many crushes throughout this film. It will take me a while. Kiefer Sutherland.
Mm-hmm.
No, like I get the story of like Max. I don't know how long he's been a vampire, and I don't know how long he's been creating vampires, and how long he's been trying to create this family of his vampire sons, and how long it took for him to come to the conclusion that what he was lacking in his family dynamic was a mother. And I get the storyline of, Lucy, you're what I need to make this work. And I just need for you to get on board.
He was manipulating her.
Shut up. What I need for you to get on board is for me to manipulate your sons into this family dynamic, and then you'll be stuck with me. And
I like the baby vampire.
That's how I'll get you.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a broader dynamic than what I want to get into, but it's I don't know, I relate to it in a way that, like, it's just very easy to trap a person into what you think you need versus being vulnerable in telling them what you actually need. So I was here for it. I had space for it. Yeah, I got it.
Full on like therapy session with this movie.
I totally got Max, and I was here for it. And I was like, Max, you know what you need? You need a good woman. Got it.
Good Lord. That's way more than I got out of this movie. Kadish, why don't you tell me why I'm wrong?
Tell him why he's wrong.
Why Corey Feldman's Rambo impression didn't ruin this movie.
Well, because it didn't. You know, I always like to kind of look into the making of films and try to take that into consideration as I'm like judging them.
Yeah.
And this film was very interesting because, so first of all, it was inspired by Peter Pan. And basically this was a take on these two, the initial screenwriters of the movie. Basically, they were watching Peter Pan one day and they're like, you know, Peter Pan, he never ages. He only comes at night, you know, and all this other stuff. And they're like, he's a vampire. And they're like, whoa, what if Peter Pan was a vampire?
You guys hear the theory that Peter Pan is death and he comes to take the children?
Well, regardless.
It's the same kind of vibe we're getting.
So, you know, in Peter Pan, the group of kids that all live with him in Neverland who never age are called the Lost Boys. And so that was the impetus for the title of this. And, you know, the script was originally supposed to be a reimagining of Peter Pan with vampires. And, you know, Joel Schumacher, when he came on board, he's like, you know, this movie's too much like Vampire Goonies. So let's give it a teenage makeover. And so one of the first things he did was that he brought on a new screenwriter named Jeffrey Boehm, who basically came in and rewrote the entire movie. So like all the original script was basically like tossed out, and Jeffrey Boehm redid everything. And for those of you who don't know who Jeffrey Boehm is, he also wrote another movie we're going to be talking about a little bit later called Inner Space. Oh. And he also did Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Lethal Weapons 2 and 3 and a bunch of other good movies. So when Schumacher came on, he basically looked at vampirism as an allegory for homosexuality. And he layered in lots of subversive kind of gay subtext into this movie. Like Joel Schumacher, like he was a well-known gay man. In fact, he once boasted that he'd had over 20,000 sexual partners in his life.
He bragged about that?
Yeah. Like he's up there with Wilt Chamberlain in terms of how many people he's had sex with. So basically, he looked at vampires and he was like, I just want to make this movie sexual, you know? And so like if you look at vampirism as allegory for homosexuality, this movie takes on like a completely different kind of angle, I guess you could say. So basically he modeled all the young Lost Boys, like the Kiefer Sutherland crew, after what kind of people who were at the time going to gay clubs like dressed as. So like they had that kind of hair and like the outcast miscreants and stuff like that.
Oh, we didn't talk about the saxophone player.
Well, we will.
Good Lord.
We will. But like, if you think about it, so Daddy Vampire Max, he's almost like a kind of vampiric Jeffrey Epstein, where he's just like basically preying on all these young boys in town and turning them into vampires.
Man, that's dark.
Yeah. And, like Joel Schumacher told Corey Feldman to butch up his voice. And basically, like this whole movie, Schumacher kind of designed it for the MTV generation.
Yeah.
Like the look, the feel, the music, everything was meant to appeal to all the kids who were like super into MTV at the time, but also with like this like kind of weird homosexual subtext to it. Like if you remember Corey Haim's Room, Schumacher had just come off of St. Elmo's Fire, which was like his big kind of breakout movie. And so he had posters of all the cast from St. Elmo's Fire in the movie, but the most prominent one is this very weird poster of Rob Lowe showing off his abs.
Yeah.
It's just like so out of nowhere. And the funny thing is like in the actual movie, the town is called Santa Carla.
Yeah.
But in reality, they shot in Santa Cruz. And in the movie, they call Santa Carla the murder capital of the world, right? Like as they're driving into town, the kids see painted on the back of the sign, welcome to Santa Carla, murder capital of the world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Santa Cruz, where the movie was shot, was actually called the murder capital of the world because of years of serial killing by 3 different serial killers in the 1970s. So that town had 3 different serial killers operating out of it at one point, which resulted in 28 murders over the course of a 30-month period.
Wow.
Like the press had dubbed it Murder Town USA.
Yeah.
And so like it kind of had this moniker. And because of that, the town didn't like they wouldn't permit movies to show them in a bad light. So like if bad stuff happened in the town, they had to change the name of the town. So it couldn't be Santa Cruz. So, they rearranged a couple letters and called it Santa Carla, which I thought was kind of funny.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense, though, in context with the movie.
So the saxophone player.
Oh, my God. This was
sexy sax.
Yes.
man.
No.
His name is Tim Cappello, and he was primarily known for his saxophone work in supporting Tina Turner in the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, so he was just like a legit musician.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been drinking a lot. Musician. And this is the thing that he is the most remembered for throughout his entire career is Sexy Sax Man.
Yeah. And
This is what he's referred to by multitudes of fans is Sexy Sax Man.
and Schumacher, who, is a gay man, he's seen him perform. He's like, oh, that's a sexy man. And so
sexy sax man.
Yeah. And so he like when Schumacher wanted to sex up the movie, he's like, I'm going to put in Tim Cappello.
Get that sexy saxophone player over here.
Boobs.
No, it's the opposite.
That guy
Man
had some
boobs.
sexy sax boobs.
Yeah. And like for those of you who might not have seen
Which
this movie,
should be the name of the episode is Sexy Sax Boobs.
like there's a whole scene where like the kids kind of go to this like on the beach concert
And
party
this
thing.
bro is, if you haven't seen this movie, this bro is
He is.
thrusting.
Just picture like The Rock oiled up with a saxophone, just
Like,
thrusting
Just
like there's no tomorrow.
thrusting
He's got this chiseled
to
body.
the rhythm of his sax.
Like his skin's all shiny because he's all oiled up. He's got this saxophone, his
And leather pants.
and he's just gyrating to his sax music.
It's so over the top.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is that kind of movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Schumacher wanted to feature him because he believed Cappello brought a lot of sex appeal to the film.
He was in it for like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very memorable 3
Get
seconds.
rid of the kids. Get rid of the kids, and that
Just
would have worked.
Spend an entire movie on Sexy Sax Man, and I'm there for it.
Sexy Sax Man coming
Sexy Sax Man.
August 2021.
Cheers, B.
Cheers.
Vader, what did you think of Sexy Sax Man?
I hate everything.
Boobs.
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 Was there boobs in this movie? I don't remember.
No.
Did Star show anything?
No, there were no
Just
boobs.
Sexy Sax Boobs.
Just sexy sex.
Yeah.
Gyrating.
It's actually funny because the way that Jamie Gertz got cast in the movie, like she had just done a movie with Jason Patric.
It's because
called
they confused her with Terry Hatcher.
That's what I was thinking. I thought it was Terry
I
Hatcher.
confuse her for Terry Hatcher.
I'm like, that's the chick from Superman.
Every time.
So Jamie Gertz had done a movie with Jason Patric called Solar Babies. And basically, Jason Patric had kind of developed a crush on her over the course of their filming that movie. And so he wanted time to kind of work on her some more. So he suggested her to Joel Schumacher. And Joel Schumacher's like, I really want Star to be kind of like a wafy blonde, like almost like a Meg Ryan type. And Jason Patric's like, no. You got to get Jamie Gertz for this. You got to get Jamie Gertz for this. And so like finally, like he convinced Schumacher to cast her in the role.
Yeah, she fit fine, I think. She did a good job in the role. She made sense.
She was wafy.
I like the... Yep.
let me see what my notes are for this movie.
Okay.
Lost Boys, 1987. Okay, there. So I wanted to get into the lore of vampires. So in this movie, they are transparent in the mirror.
Yeah, transparent, not invisible.
Yes.
Yeah.
The immediate transformation, which is when he took part in the blood wine.
Yeah.
Killing the daddy vamp turns the babies / half vamps back.
Yeah.
The invitation renders you powerless, which in other vampire lore, it's just that they can come in.
Yeah. They can't enter your house unless
I thought that was
invited.
interesting that the invitation renders you
Which
powerless.
is the same thing from Fright Night, too.
Well, no, not necessarily, because if it renders you powerless, then anything that you would do to defend yourself against a vampire, it renders you powerless if you've already invited them in.
Yeah, but the cross didn't work in Fright Night, did it? That night when he came in?
But the stake did.
It's a stake.
It kind of worked, but he like moved his arm away before he could use the cross against him in Fright Night.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's a bit ambiguous. Some mind control and flying, minor transformations, the dead man's blood thing, which I think is key in vampire lore. Like in some vampire lore, you can drink from the dead. In some vampire lore, you cannot. Day walking, piercing the heart with whatever, and the familiar. Putting up my
Did they have
My
familiars
quotes.
in this movie? In The Boys?
the pet dog familiar of Max. He had a pet dog.
A dog.
Yeah,
Does
Thorn.
that count as a familiar?
Yeah, that's his familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
It guarded him while he slept during the day.
Yeah. So
okay.
versus in Fright Night, his familiar was his roommate.
Yeah.
Although they never really said what that guy was. in Fright Night.
Yeah.
A Frankenstein
it's-
type thing.
yeah,
huh?
who
Couldn't die.
knows?
We didn't
Like-
even mention him when we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Shame on us.
Yeah, shame on us.
Keep going.
And that's really all I have for
Okay.
this movie. Is just like the different rules
Yeah.
of vampire.
Well, interestingly enough, so Jude's a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And this movie was one of the biggest influences on Joss Whedon
I
in the
bet.
creation of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So not only did he take the idea of like teenage vampires who can look normal and then like turn into, creatures of the night, he basically, like took the phrase vamp out. Like this was the first movie to use that phrase, and they kind of co-opted that for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Goddamn shit sucking vampire.
Yeah.
Which is the sexiest way to refer to a vampire.
Kiefer Sutherland's character David was a heavy influence on the character of Spike.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and actually, oddly enough, Fright Night.
Keith David?
No, Keith.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I think I missed
His character's named David
Oh,
in Lost
Michael.
Boys. Well, Michael's the Jason
brother.
Patric character.
The main character. Who is the main character? Is it Michael or is it his brother?
It's Michael.
Okay, good.
Brother's a piece
of
but
shit.
funny enough, when we were talking about Fright Night, we forgot to mention that Buffy the Vampire Slayer took inspiration from the makeup effects, and in Lost Boys, the makeup effects directly influenced how the vampires in Buffy the Vampire Slayer looked, because they basically just stole the effects from this
I mean,
movie.
it's just like a forehead ridge and some contacts and some teeth.
yeah.
Which I thought the interesting thing, there was a little bit of a change in Lost Boys where the vampires' teeth are more towards the front, almost like instead of like the canines. Usually they're more set back, but in this movie they were like prominent.
and this movie, we talked about the contact lenses in Fright Night, and they did another thing in this movie where they kind of had streamlined the contact lenses a bit, but this was the first movie to actually use like full like eye contact lenses, the ones that covered like the entire eye. And it was funny because there's a scene where Kiefer Sutherland is trying to grab one of the the Coreys as they're trying to escape their lair after they kill Bill the vampire.
Yeah, the worst scene in the movie. Yeah.
And
Bill the vampire.
And he gets his hand burned and he pulls back and there's a shot and like a little tear rolls down his cheek. And that was actually an accident because the contacts were irritating his eyes so much that he just, watered up and a tear escaped. And Schumacher was like, that looks great. Let's keep it.
Yeah, he's so sad that Bill is dead.
It's beautiful.
And
filmmaking.
And in the blood for this movie, they actually put in glitter, like silver flakes in the blood.
Is this what started the Twilight shining
No.
vampires?
No.
I'm talking about the blood, not the vampires, dude. Like,
Yeah, but
but they added it to the blood in order to make it look better on screen. So like it gives it this shimmering appearance.
That sounds like an influence on Twilight.
So the thing that
The vampires
I
sparkled
think-
in Twilight, not the blood. Have you even
right.
seen Twilight?
No.
Yeah, okay, I thought so. Yeah.
I have some factoids on that. So the thing that I think influenced the shimmering vampire of the Twilight vampire series is the Anne Rice. So Anne Rice was one of the first, I think she was the first writer to make a romantic vampire, and how she described her vampires were their skin was like porcelain and it was reflective of light. And that's where I think the glittering vampire kind of came from. So it went from the Anne Rice, so porcelain and fair that it reflects light, to when light hits us, we become a disco ball.
And it's really funny because in both Fright Night and this movie, they kind of take the typical vampire lore, like stuff that you've seen from movies and in Lost Boys case, comic books, and basically say like it's all real. And what was interesting is like one of the scenes that we get introduced to the Frog Brothers in this movie is when Corey Haim goes into the comic book store. And by the way, this was the first time the two Coreys appeared together and kind of launched the whole like Corey Haim, Corey Feldman team up.
Yeah, ruin the movie? Yeah, cool.
But they go into the comic book store and it's very blatant that like where they showcase both Batman and Superman. And what was interesting is Richard Donner, the guy who was originally supposed to direct this and he went on to produce the movie, he made the original Superman movies. And then Joel Schumacher went on to direct Batman movies. And so like I just thought that was kind of interesting.
You ruined those movies too. Wow, what a shocker.
He gave Batman nipples.
Anyway, all right, final thoughts on Lost Boys. I'm just going to, I said it once again. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it, but just like if you cut the Coreys out and you cut the little brother and the stupid.
Basically, if you cut out every character in the movie.
No, that's not true.
Actually,
that's not what I'm saying.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask you, so like at the end of the movie, the grandpa shows up and kills Max.
Oh, yeah. What's your take?
And there's this kind of controversy surrounding the ending where he goes to his refrigerator. And so like there's a special shelf in his refrigerator that has his root beers on it, and no one's allowed to touch his root beers because that's just for him. And after he kills Max, he goes to his refrigerator, opens the door, pulls out a root beer. And as he's drinking, the bottle of root beer, you can see that it looks like it's blood. And there's been this theory.
Red tinged.
There's this theory that the grandpa was actually a half vampire who's never killed a human. So like he never fully turned, but he's like kind of like how Michael was, where like it was theorized that this woman that he keeps seeing, the widow,
Widow Johnson.
the widow Johnson was actually a vampire who turned him. And he's just been kind of like chilling out in retirement, trying not to kill. And like he goes out, he kills animals, takes their blood, and then does taxidermy on them. And that's why he has all these like stuffed animals in the apartment.
You know what that sounds like? Twilight. Because you know what those vampires do to stop from killing people? Kill animals and drink their blood. No, all this stuff. It sounds very familiar. It sounds like it's stuff from Twilight. I like that theory, though.
It's vampire stuff. So do you think the grandpa was a vampire at the end?
I do.
I don't.
No? Do you think he's like a Van Helsing type thing?
I think he was a human who knew there were vampires. He was like, these vampires.
I love that last line in the movie.
I love
like
that.
The problem with this town, too many fucking vampires.
Too many vampires.
So he knew all along.
Yeah. I feel like he's just a human who's just like, ugh, these vampires, gross.
And we got to say,
And I don't think that he's a vampire.
we got to say that we didn't even mention this. Like, this movie has one of the greatest 80s
I'm a little
power
annoyed
ballads
right now.
ever composed. The Cry Little Sister theme. Oh my God. I love that song.
Music's good in this movie.
Music's really good.
Yeah. Just take the kids. Anybody under the age of 15, cut them out of the movie. Perfect movie.
Kadish
just take
listens to this soundtrack in the shower and just like makes
Cry,
muscles.
little sister.
He just makes muscles at himself.
If
in
you
the
just
mirror.
focus on
Yeah.
Michael, leave the little brother behind.
The child choir. And
Yeah.
like the,
Yeah.
the child
like
choir.
the Gothic organs. And
Thou shalt not
cry.
Yeah, that was creepy. Really creepy. But anyway, anybody under the age of 15, cut out of this movie. It's a perfect movie. Stick with Michael. Focus on Michael and Grandpa and his mom and that whole dynamic. Perfect. It works. I think it was a great movie. You add in the Corys and all that other
Take out the
bullshit.
saxophonist.
You can leave that if you really want to. You can leave that in there.
Sexy
But
sax man.
Take the comic
You don't-
book
Take
kids,
down that Rob Lowe poster.
the
That's
Goonies.
the only reason why you don't want your children over 15 to watch this is because they'll get too incited by sexy sax man.
The 80s were a strange
Yeah.
time. Yeah, I'll tell you what.
They'll start gyrating
That's
in the
it.
kitchen where you don't want them to.
Those are my final thoughts on this movie.
To
Just
jazz.
get rid of the Corys.
You don't want jazz gyrating children.
All right. Moving on, I guess.
Matt Vader, what did you think of this movie?
The movie's stupid.
Yeah. Thank you, Vader. I agree with you, sir.
Thanks for keeping us on
I
track.
disagree. Vader loves vampires and boobs.
Bring that mic closer to your face.
Speaking of boobs, we're getting into it with the vampire boobs.
Here we go. This is my favorite movie. But before we get into it, I wanted to remind everybody that listening, today we are featuring a special item on the Salty Nerd store. It's a shirt that I designed. This is some serious gourmet shit from Pulp Fiction featuring Jules Winsfield. That's right. That's a shirt I designed yesterday. I uploaded it late last night. It is available to you. We have a ton of other shirts on there. I've got Jude's Scream Queen, original Scream Queen, also 80s tits is on there. We've got Matt
You've got
Vader's.
my 80s tits on there.
We've also got Matt Vader's Ever Been with a Big Man. That's on there as well. We have a ton of cool merch. If you want to support the podcast, please go over to saltynerdstore.com. We're looking to raise about $1,000 so that we can buy some more equipment for the podcast. We're looking for some more soundproofing, along with a couple other things that we need to eventually start doing some live streaming. That's right. We're trying to save money from your support to get ourselves up and running so that we can do YouTube live streams. So help us out. Go to saltynerdstore.com, buy some merchandise there. We have a ton of great shirts there. Kadish has some designs he uploaded, as well as I have ones that I'm working on. It's like a hobby for me. I sit and when I'm editing or when I'm doing something else, I always have ideas for t-shirts, and I love working on it. So help us support the podcast, saltynerdstore.com. Get some cool stuff. All right. Last but not least, this is my favorite. I have zero complaints about this movie. This is Dusk Till Dawn, starring George Clooney at his freaking finest, Quentin Tarantino at his least crazy, and freaking Selma Hayek. Good Lord.
Oof. Yes.
Enough
bitch.
said. Jude, take it away.
Botanical.
What is Dusk?
Pandemonium. Okay, so our third vampire movie. So they made me narrow it down to 3 movies. So this was my third pick, was From Dusk Till Dawn, released in January of 1996. So the just to give you some backstory, the budget was $19 million. It grossed $25.8 million.
Nice.
It was directed by Robert Rodriguez, and the writers were Robert Kurtzman and Quentin Tarantino. So it starred Harvey Keitel, George Clooney, Juliette Lewis, and obviously Quentin Tarantino is in this.
As the
So
crazy
it
brother.
is a movie about a couple of brothers trying to get away from the law after a jailbreak, and when they finally feel like they have gotten to the place where a sanctuary
They had to get
is-
across the border.
Yeah, they've gotten across the border. They're about to establish sanctuary in Mexico, and lo and behold, it's
The titty
a
twister.
vampire bar,
Yeah.
and they have to fight their way out in order to survive.
I love this movie.
This movie. It makes I'm going to swear. It makes no fucking sense. There are no rules to this movie. And this is one of the points that I wanted to get to with the vampire lore, which is what I wanted to talk about when we were doing Vampire Week, is like the different genres within the genre and the rules within the genre is like there are rules within vampire movies. And this movie has no fucking rules. It's just like...
It just makes it up as it goes.
It's just we're bank robbers and we're badasses and oh shit, now we're vampires. and even in the realm of vampires, it's like, what kills you? I don't know. Fucking anything. Well, what transforms
Does
you?
anybody have
I
any
don't
silver?
know.
Well, then who
anything.
cares?
Well, are you a sexy vampire? Maybe. Or do you bite with your mouth? Maybe it's my stomach. Maybe it's my vagina. Maybe it's my foot. I don't know. I'm Tarantino. I like feet. Who knows? This movie has no fucking rules, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. It's just crazy. It's like so. Okay, so some backstory. When I originally watched this movie, I did not know what I was getting into. This was the first Quentin Tarantino movie that I had ever seen in my entire life.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't remember if I'm pretty sure I did not see this in the theater, but it just made such an impact on me because I love horror movies and I also love Tarantino movies. And this was the first Tarantino movie I had ever seen. So this was a movie I went into and I had no expectations of. And then once I got into it,
Did you know it was a vampire movie
I
going
had
in?
no idea.
Okay, because they don't set that
and
up at all.
No, I think that when I watched this, it was just like on a streaming or a VHS or DVD or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just watched it in I'm pretty sure a group setting in someone's living room and was just like, okay, whatever, we're having a movie night. And when I got into it, I was like, oh, this is cool. Oh shit. What? And this was like just fucking mind-boggling, and I loved it. And I think this was the pinnacle of like why I started getting into Tarantino movies and why this was my first introduction to a Quentin Tarantino movie. And this was, I don't even think I even realized that it was a Tarantino. It was
a Robert Rodriguez
It was just
movie.
a movie to me.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is awesome. And then the next Tarantino movie that I saw, and I don't remember which one it was or what order it was that I saw, and this is like the beginning of my love affair with loving Tarantino movies. And it was this. And I mean, if you know me, you know I love vampire movies and you know I love weird, campy, unexplainable shit. And this just checks some fucking boxes for me. And like, I love a movie that like starts off in a way. And I also love like Stephen King books where you think you know where you're going. And then all of a sudden King like whamps you and you're like, oh shit, I didn't expect that. And this is what that movie did for me.
I really wish like the marketing had kind of hidden the vampire twist in this. Cause
Okay, so that's what it was for
Yeah.
me. So I didn't have any information going into this movie. I don't remember.
You want to do it cold.
Yeah, I don't remember how I saw this movie. I don't remember when I saw this movie. I don't remember where I saw this movie. The only thing that I remember is how I felt when I saw this movie. And I didn't have any information going in, and that's what you need going into this movie is that it's just like a Stephen King novel.
I remember when this movie came out, and I was like very heavy into like the whole Tarantino indie film world at this time, because this was like right before I kind of went into my senior year of high school, and I was like very like kind of steeped in like the whole filmmaking culture. So I was really excited when this movie came out because I'd been like a big fan of Robert Rodriguez. Like I'd studied like El Mariachi, and like the story behind that is like, you know, Robert Rodriguez, he was this nobody from Mexico who made a movie for like $7,000, like a big budget action movie for $7,000 that got picked up by Hollywood. And he was kind of thrust into the limelight, and he made this movie called Desperado, which was just like a insane, crazy action film.
Freaking love mine. El Mariachi was a completely Spanish made movie.
Yeah.
Crossover. I watched Desperado first, and then I went back and I watched El Mariachi, and that was my introduction to Robert Rodriguez.
Okay.
Then I fell in love with Selma Hayek, and then I watched Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Robert Rodriguez, you know, like he made like this action movie for like $7,000, and it was completely off the wall crazy. It
was amazing.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like the darling of the indie film world at that time. And so I was really excited that him and Tarantino were teaming up because, like Pulp Fiction had just come out. That was amazing. All these movies that Tarantino had been involved in were really good, like Natural Born Killers and True Romance and stuff like that. And so when Dusk Till Dawn was coming out, like commercials, trailers, everything, they told you this is about vampires.
Yeah.
So like I was like, okay, I'm down. And so like when I went to see it, I was actually really disappointed because I went and saw it in the theater opening day. And I liked the first half of it, which was like the whole like kind of Tarantino-ish crime saga.
Very Tarantino, yeah.
And then like the minute it became a
Robert Rodriguez movie.
exploitation vampire like thing, I was like, this just isn't very appealing to me. And so like I left the theater with very mixed feelings on this film, where I felt like it was a very uneven movie, where like it had really great elements to it, and then like they kind of chucked all that out the window and just went like whole hog, like campy.
Yeah.
And over time, I've come to appreciate it more. But I think, when I originally saw it, I wasn't very impressed. I was kind of disappointed, actually.
Like I said, my introduction to this movie was in exploring Robert Rodriguez. I had seen Desperado, and I freaking fell in love with Antonio Banderas, Selma Hayek.
Antonio Banderas.
Freaking incredible. I love...
No, it's too sexy. It's too sexy, Antonio.
I love Desperado. It's one of my favorite movies ever.
It's a great movie.
And I fell in love with not only that story, but I fell in love with Selma Hayek at the same time. And later on, of course, I married a Mexican girl, and then it's Robert Rodriguez's fault. So I watched Desperado, then I watched El Mariachi, and I was like, who's this Robert Rodriguez guy? And then I later, much later on, I found out about Dusk Till Dawn, and I was like, oh, cool. Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, dope. I love them. I love both these guys. Mix them together, and it's exactly what you get. It's a very mixed film. It is. You have Quentin Tarantino for the first 30, 45 minutes, and then you have full-on Robert Rodriguez for the ending of it, and the two mixed together. It's so wonderfully wonderful carnage to watch this movie, where you get all these like over-the-top, like gory vampire kills. You get the reveal that Selma Hayek is like the lead queen vampire. They all kind of look like snakes or whatnot. My favorite like reveal at the end is when the band turns into vampires and they're playing like body parts as instruments. Like that was like
the guitar is crazy.
It's a person,
crazy town
with
to me.
no arms and no legs.
that was one of my show notes. I'm gonna read you my show notes.
But just that same band is the band that plays in
Tito and the Tarantulas.
Yeah, they play in Desperado at the beginning for the opening credits. Also,
my show notes go like this: From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996. The guitar. There are no rules. That's it.
That's it.
Well,
that guitar. I was like, okay, I need to make. I wanted to go at this as a vampire rules perspective, and with this movie, like I love it so much, but there are no rules.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
There are really no rules.
We could talk about the movie all day, but I think most people have already seen it. So let's talk about the rules that it breaks and the rules that it establishes.
Okay.
So crosses work.
Crosses work.
They keep them at bay.
Which is like in Fright Night, you have to have faith.
Yes. In
For
this
the cross
one,
to work. In this one, it just has to be cross.
just has to be a cross.
Yeah.
And you have to have holy water that's been blessed by a priest, which in that stupid freaking Lost Boys movie, they didn't matter. They were like, this is holy water, and we have squirt guns because they said so. In this movie, they actually have to have a priest bless the water in order for it to work against a vampire.
Right.
And it doesn't work that well. It's kind of like it burns them a little bit, but they can work past it if they wanted to. Because there was that one dude who gets
there
sprayed
are so
with
many
it,
loopholes.
and he just keeps on trucking. It doesn't even matter to him. And I love that. I love how quickly, like one person will turn like on a dime.
Yeah.
You get bit, you're a vampire immediately.
Yeah.
And other people, you lay there for like 15, 20 minutes, and then you become a vampire.
Yeah, and like in some vampire movies, which I know Interview with the Vampire was not one of the ones that we're talking about today, but in for example, that lore, you can bite a human and drink from them, and they can go on, and you can also go on, and you don't have to worry about it. Which in other vampire lore, if a vampire bites you, you either die or become a vampire.
Yeah.
In many of the vampire lores, like Twilight and the movies that we're talking about today. I think in all of them, if you are bitten, you become a vampire. Yeah. So and that's the difference in the rules of vampire movies that I wanted to kind of talk about.
Yeah, we'll go for it. What else you got? Anything else? What else did they do in this movie to fight? I mean, guns work, right?
Wouldn't
Kind
snakes-
of.
The bullets wouldn't kill them unless like
if you put a cross
them.
on the bullets.
Oh, is that what they were
worked.
doing?
Yeah. So you can shoot a vampire as long as you etched a cross into the bullet.
Oh, that's a nice loophole.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I thought they were just because that's an actual thing. You can cut the soft end of a bullet, and what it does is basically it mushrooms out. It becomes almost like a hollow point kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in real world,
So that's the cross loophole.
okay. I didn't know they were doing crosses. I thought they were just making their bullets like hollow points.
Yeah.
Okay,
Whereas
that's cool.
in Fright Night, you had to have faith in the cross in order for it to work against you.
Silver-
So if you had etched a cross into a bullet, but you had no faith, it would have no repercussions.
But that doesn't matter in this movie,
No.
right? Okay.
No, not in this one.
Okay. And also the vampires are snakes in this movie.
Well,
The
sometimes they're bats or rats or something.
They have
The
different
transformations is
so wacky.
a whole nother genre to get into because in Fright Night, Evil Ed turned into a wolf. Like, what's that about?
Yeah.
And in this one, they all turned into bats. And like some of the transformations of the
It's
vampires.
instantaneous. It's almost like it's a facade.
Yeah, it's like within the hour of when you get bitten. Whereas in a lot of other vampire lore, you have to be dead for 3 days, and
some
then
of them,
you
it
are
takes,
risen as a vampire.
Some of them in this, it just takes a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I just remember Quentin
the
Tarantino's
nearly immediate transformation.
yeah, it's weird. It does, like in this movie, it has a lot more to do with just the surprise element within the movie. The director was like, okay, we don't want him to turn until this happens so that we can surprise the audience.
Yeah.
It was very
So-
plot convenience.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
So
what I was
in this
looking for.
movie where the vampire comes out and she's just kind of like bloated, and then it turns out like that her belly is a vampire mouth and she like beheads a person. That was totally a thing that they had talked about in a party one night after hours. They were like, yeah, we should do this. That would be fucking awesome.
They just put it in the movie.
Yeah. And then like when they went to actually film it, the director was like, dude, is that thing
legit?
that we talked about?
I don't
and they were
remember
like,
saying that.
yeah, dude, this is literally a sketch that you made me do.
Okay. There's a lot of weird stuff in this
Yeah.
movie.
I mean, it turned out to be a cool scene.
So can we talk about Selma Hayek for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
We talk about Selma Hayek the rest of the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So she plays the character Santanico Pandemonium. Pandemonium. Lowly dogs, get on your knees. So originally her character was called the Blonde Death, and she was supposed to be like a white chick.
Can we
And-
also talk about feet while we're at it?
We will, yeah.
Quentin Tarantino.
So basically, Robert Rodriguez, when he came on board to direct, originally he wanted Antonio Banderas as the George Clooney role, and Seth Gecko, is that his name? Mm-hmm. And eventually went to Clooney, but he also wanted to bring in Salma Hayek for the character. And so once she was cast, Tarantino was like, well, we can't call her Blonde Death because she's not going to be blonde. So when he was a video store clerk, and he was initially a clerk when he was hired to write this movie, he'd always see this kind of Mexican exploitation movie on the shelf called Santanico Pandemonium. And I don't think he ever watched it, but like he'd always see that title and he's like, that's a really cool title. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to name her Santanico Pandemonium. So like once Salma Hayek got cast, he changed the name because it was, the title of a gory Mexican horror movie.
There you go.
But what was funny is, so when they initially approached Salma Hayek about being in the movie, in the script, she has this like snake dance that she does. And Salma Hayek had like this super phobia of snakes. Like she just refused to be near them. They scared the crap out of her. And so she didn't want to do the movie with that scene in it. And Robert Rodriguez was like, well, Madonna's been, campaigning for this role, and like she can't wait to do it. And can you imagine like people seeing Madonna up there like being all sexy with the snake, and Salma Hayek's like, I'm not going to let Madonna outdo me. And so like she actually went to therapy for like months before
to deal with the snake,
shooting this movie to like overcome her fear of snakes.
Salma Hayek is infinitely more attractive than freaking Madonna.
Yeah, but it was just kind of funny how like Rodriguez like manipulated her into, like, I guess he just preyed on her like competitiveness, and so like she actually had to overcome like a deep-seated fear in order to do this movie. And another funny part was that, so like, the big thing with Salma Hayek in this movie is her dance sequence. Like she kind of comes out and she does this sexy dance, and she's just basically in a bikini and thong and, shaking her hips. And they didn't have a choreographer for this movie. Like she came out on set and it's like, so what am I supposed to do? And Robert Rodriguez was like, just dance to the music. And she's like, any particular type of dance? And he's like, no, just go with the flow. Like listen to the music and just do what comes naturally. And so like, if you watch this movie, like Salma Hayek's dance is just like her kind of like slowly swaying her hips. Like it's the most lazy dance you've ever seen in your life.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah. I mean, like she looks good doing it, but it's kind of funny because like no one was there to kind of like coach her on like what exactly to do.
So do a striptease dance.
Yeah.
So you're saying the bar is low.
Yeah. So she was just making it up as she went. But it is.
I don't actually have to keep rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you look at it, like the climax of the song, it's just like her, like she's got her long hair and she's just kind of like twirling her head around and shaking her hips, and like that's all she does. And it's like
that's all she has to do, man.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think the most choreographed part was when she goes to Tarantino's character Richie
and pours whiskey down her
kneels
foot.
down, puts her foot in his mouth. Yeah, and like Tarantino.
Yeah, that was written into the script. Make sure you put your foot in my fucking mouth.
Yes, Tarantino's got a weird foot fetish.
Yeah, Tarantino has a very well-known foot fetish, and it was on full display in this movie. And it was funny. So like, the scene where Salma Hayek is attacking George Clooney.
Yeah.
And she's like, like, I'll make you my dog. You'll lick the shit off my boots or like whatever. And he says, no, thanks. I've already had a wife. And so like the marketing department put that in the trailer, but Robert Rodriguez had never intended to actually use it because it was an ad lib by Clooney. And like on the day, like they were just shooting a lot of stuff, and Clooney came up with that, and Rodriguez like actually had a different response in mind for that line. And when it was in all the trailers, Rodriguez was like, well, now I have to put it in the movie. Because he's like, I don't want to be that guy who has the thing in the trailer that's not in the movie.
Rogue One.
Yeah. Twister at the time. Yeah. But the story behind the making of this movie is actually kind of interesting, because this wasn't a Tarantino original, even though like it comes off as like a Tarantino movie. In reality, it was actually developed by this very famous special effects artist, and his name was Kurtzman. I forget his first name. But in 1988, he formed a special effects group with Greg Nicotero, who did all the special effects for The Walking Dead, and Howard Berger, and they created this company called K&B Effects. And they were a makeup effects studio that went on to do like over 400 films and television projects. It was a real powerhouse in the special effects makeup world of Hollywood. And they were responsible for movies like, Evil Dead 2, Night of the Creeps, Phantasm 2, People Under the Stairs. Pretty much every horror movie remembered today for extravagant makeup effects, like K&B did them. And so after they distinguished themselves in the industry for doing like really quality work at good prices, Kurtzman wanted to get more into writing and directing instead of doing like the effects work. So he moved from LA to Ohio and formed Precinct 13 Entertainment. And basically, one of his all-time favorite movies was John Carpenter's Precinct 13, which is about a gang of criminals who assault a police precinct with a small group of policemen who are like kind of barricaded in there, and they have to fight them off until dawn. And so Kurtzman kind of came up with the idea for From Dusk Till Dawn and wrote like a 24-page treatment where he outlined the film and all the characters, and he kind of conceived it as a directorial vehicle for himself. And he wanted to do a film that could be done on a very small budget, with an isolated group of characters trapped in a enclosed setting, a lot like Assault on Precinct 13. And it was his idea to kind of make it like half road movie, half, assault film.
Yeah.
So he had a producing friend named David Goodman who hooked him up with Quentin Tarantino, who at the time, Tarantino was in development with Reservoir Dogs, and he was trying to get a couple of scripts off the ground. Like he had written True Romance and Natural Born Killers, but he hadn't actually like gotten anything made yet. So he was still working as a video store clerk at the time. And him and Kurtzman kind of hit it off, and Kurtzman hired him to write the script for them. And he made a deal with Tarantino. He's like, okay, I can't pay you much. I'll pay you $1,500, but in exchange for taking the smaller salary, K&B Effects will do the effects for Reservoir Dogs. And so like the whole like ear scene in Reservoir Dogs, that was all K&B Effects, and they basically did it pro bono in exchange for him writing From Dusk Till Dawn. And so, at the time, Tarantino jumped at this chance. It was his first ever paid writing gig. It was enough money for him to quit the video store job and work on his movies full time. And so it was his first work for hire screenplay. And he was trying to get Reservoir Dogs off the ground. And once that hit, and he went on to do Pulp Fiction, and that did really well, Tarantino and Kurtzman spent 10 years trying to get From Dusk Till Dawn made. And it was kind of funny because even though Pulp Fiction had basically catapulted Tarantino into like the A-list tier of Hollywood, no studio wanted to do From Dusk Till Dawn, even after all of Tarantino's success, because they thought it was too vulgar, too violent. They didn't understand the turn from road picture to vampire halfway through the film. Yeah. And they were just like, this movie just doesn't work. And so, and also Kurtzman was kind of attached to direct the movie, and he'd never directed anything before. And so no studio wanted to give him a shot. And they were just pitching as like, give us like, $1.5 million, like not a whole lot of money, like $2 million to make this movie. And at the time, Robert Rodriguez was kind of like the hot director, and he was coming off the massive success of Desperado and El Mariachi, as we talked about before. And he'd had like a lot of, I guess you'd say, like hype surrounding him. And he did a collaboration with Quentin Tarantino called 4 Rooms, which was basically a movie with Tim Roth, where 4 different directors did like little segments of the movie. And the only thing that connected the segments was Tim Roth's character. And so they met on that movie, and Tarantino, when he was, hanging out with Rodriguez on this film, he mentioned that he had like this horror movie set in Mexico. And Robert Rodriguez, being Mexican from Mexico, he was like, hey, I'd love to check that out. And so once he got his hands on the script, he kind of wanted to work on it. And so once Rodriguez came on board, Kurtzman decided, we've been trying to get this movie made for 10 years. The combination of Tarantino and Rodriguez is going to be too much for anyone to turn down. I'm going to step aside and just produce the film and let Rodriguez direct it. And so once he decided to step aside and let Rodriguez attach himself as director, Miramax stepped in and gave them like a budget of $17 million. And at the time, like Tarantino, right after the success of Pulp Fiction, he'd gone on to direct an episode of ER, which was like the hottest show on TV at the time. And that's where he met George Clooney. And on the set of ER, like he kind of decided, Clooney's like was a rising star at the time. He was getting a lot of movie offers, and he was like, "Hey, Clooney, would you like to work on my next movie with me?" And Clooney was like, "Hell yes, I would." And so, they recruited him for the role of Seth Gecko. And Clooney only got paid $250,000 for this movie. And one of the interesting things about this film is that it was all non-union, and it caused all types of problems. But Tarantino has been like notoriously non-union.
Yeah, I'm with him on that.
Like he refuses to join the Writers Guild or the Directors Guild. And when they were making this movie, they were keeping the budget low by not paying all these union fees. So they basically hired like all non-union people to shoot this movie in Mexico. And the Hollywood unions were fucking pissed about this, and they kept trying to organize a strike against the picture to like prevent it from being made. And so like they were constantly fighting against like these like really powerful Hollywood unions to try to get this film produced.
I hate unions. I've been involved in them for a couple of years now doing the work that I do, and they are nothing but trouble, and they do nothing but harbor laziness. And I am like anti-union now. I didn't used to be. I used to be pro-union, and then I was like, once I got involved in it, I'm like, these things are freaking useless.
Yeah.
So when I see people do this and they stick it to a union, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, but it is funny that this whole movie was kind of based off of Assault on Precinct 13, and in the film, the kid, the Asian kid, I forget his name. He's wearing an Assault on Precinct 13 T-shirt as a way to pay homage to the film's roots.
Ernest Liu played Scott Fuller.
Yeah, Scott.
So I want to talk about a couple of things. A couple of the standout characters to me. Obviously, Salma Hayek, standout character. Sex Machine.
Sex Machine.
Played by
Do you know?
Tom
Savini.
Yeah, makeup artist.
That is how
legendary.
Kadish referred to himself on our first date.
Sex Machine?
Yeah.
Because it was just so...
I love Sex Machine. I
Yeah.
still do to this day.
There you go.
Every day, babe.
Sex Machine.
The other boobs. The other thing I want to talk about was how many characters did Cheech play in this movie?
Okay. I was hoping
I
this
love
would come
this.
up.
I love this.
So he plays 3 different characters in the
He
film.
plays the Border Patrol officer.
Patrol.
And the
Awesome.
only thing anyone knows him by is Smelly Pussy.
Well, the character's name is Chet Pussy in the movie.
Got every kinds of pussy you want here.
He's got one of the most legendary monologues of any movie.
Amazing.
Where he just lists every type of pussy imaginable.
You want dry pussy? We've got wet pussy. We got every kind of pussy. We don't have it. You don't want it.
If you can find pussy anywhere else cheaper, fuck it. Wet pussy, dry pussy, smelly pussy,
Apple pie pussy.
Up pussy, down pussy, inside out pussy.
And then he plays the gangster at the end who came to pick them up. And
Were they psychos?
yeah, one of the best lines is like, "Who were those guys? Psychos?" And George Clooney's like, I don't care how crazy you are. When sunlight hits you, you don't blow up.
This is my favorite part of the movie. He's like,
Yeah. He's like, out
is
of
my
all the
favorite.
places in Mexico, why
Yeah.
did you choose this
titty
one? And he's,
twister.
yeah.
he's like,
this
what?
is a good place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good place as any. I drive by it occasionally. It looks
It's got
looks
smelly
fine.
pussy.
But I turned to Jude, and it is funny because Cheech Marin plays 3 different characters in this movie, and I said I think what the movie's trying to say is that every old guy in Mexico looks like Cheech Marin. Yeah, like if they all just look the same, they're
all
like
look
completely interchangeable.
That's an awful thing to say, but that's kind of what the movie is telling you. Everybody just looks like Cheech.
Every
don't know
old
how to
old Mexican
describe
guy
my
looks like
face
Cheech
right
Marin.
now.
Yeah. She looks pained.
Yeah, it's true, but I don't want to
Don't
acknowledge
say it. Don't say it,
My
but
eyes
it's true.
are closed. If I keep my eyes closed, I
Danny
don't acknowledge
Trejo.
it.
Danny Trejo in
Danny
this movie is fantastic.
He makes great donuts.
Don't.
actually.
Yeah. Buy his donuts.
Yeah, in
Buy
LA,
his
he
donuts.
has,
Eat 'em.
he has
He has
his
a
own
donut shop?
He has his own donut shop in
I didn't
LA.
know that.
Yeah, apparently the donuts are very good.
Master donut maker.
But yeah, Danny Trejo is kind of like the Robert De Niro for Robert Rodriguez. He just appears in all of his movies.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Machete.
yeah, as Machete, and you know he was in Desperado, and
Yep.
I think he might have also been in Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Yes,
I don't
he was.
remember. But he's just like, I mean, he's hilarious, and it was it's funny because the clerk at Benny's Liquor at the beginning.
Yeah.
Originally that the actors who were supposed to play that character, like originally they wanted Tim Roth, and Tim Roth was like, I can't make it work. I've got scheduling issues.
Yeah.
Then they went to Steve Buscemi, and Steve Buscemi was like, I can't do it.
That would have been perfect.
I know. So like, this movie is just filled with like Tarantino and Rodriguez regulars.
Yeah.
And in fact, they even have stuff like Big Kahuna Burger in it. And
Do they?
yeah, like
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, when Seth is coming back after leaving Richie alone with the hostage at the motel at the beginning, he's bringing a bag of Big Kahuna Burger with him. And
Got all the tropes with him.
That's awesome.
yeah, and the beer that they serve in the titty twister is the same beer from Desperado.
Nice.
Yeah, so like they got like a lot of like little.
Pissworm changa.
Is that what they call it?
Oh, we have some pissworm changa.
I think it was Chango.
Django?
Something like that.
Mexican and domestic.
Yeah. At the end where he's like, "You want some beer? We got Mexican and domestic, but they're in Mexico, so it's like the domestic is Mexican." That was a good little thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of
They
good
had
moments
they
in
had to
this
use green blood for the vampires to avoid an NC-17 rating.
Oh, I
because
believe
of all the
that.
gore.
Yep.
And Greg Nicotero makes a little cameo appearance where Tom Savini kind of like steals his beer from him. And so it was kind of funny seeing.
He's one of the effects guys.
Yeah, it's kind of funny seeing these two legendary effects artists kind of like on screen together. And actually, Tom Savini, who played Sex Machine, so like he's one of the most legendary special effects makeup artists, to ever live. And he actually knows how to use a whip. And so like the entire time he's using a whip, like that's like really him just like expertly wielding this thing.
Nice.
And and here's something that I think you'll appreciate.
Why are you pointing at me?
Just because I'm excited. So
He points at you.
It made me excited.
Just a big man.
It's just two pieces of pod, you guys.
So
What is it?
one of the most famous things in Pulp Fiction was the Ezekiel 25:17 speech, which Samuel L. Jackson gives.
You read the Bible, Brett?
Yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be in this movie, and it was supposed to be spoken by Harvey Keitel's character Jacob right at the end scene, like right before they go out to fight all the vampires. Like he was supposed to deliver the Ezekiel 25:17 speech, and Tarantino took it out of this movie and put it in Pulp Fiction because he wasn't sure if like he'd ever get to make From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
So like originally that was supposed to be in
I
this
think
film.
that would have been badass for his character, but I don't miss it
Yeah.
in this movie.
Another funny thing, we're talking about recurring characters. So the U.S. Marshal Earl McGraw at the beginning, like the little cowboy guy. So like he dies in this movie. Gets killed at the very beginning. But he shows up in 3 other Tarantino
he does.
Rodriguez movies. He shows up in Kill Bill Volume 1.
Yep.
He shows up in Death Proof, and he shows up in Planet Terror.
Yes, he
Yep.
does.
And even the title of this movie, From Dusk Till Dawn, that's taken from like the drive-ins where they play movies from dusk till dawn. And this movie is kind of like the precursor of the grindhouse exploitation style that Tarantino and Rodriguez have kind of popularized. So this was kind of like the precursor to Death Proof and Planet Terror and stuff like that. Just that kind of bat crap crazy.
Yeah. I think we need to do a specific show all about Robert Rodriguez movies and
I
just
agree.
go full on, do Death Proof, do
I
Planet
agree.
Terror.
Yeah, Spy Kids.
No. I mean, the first one wasn't bad, but no, not the rest of them. I have no complaints about this movie. It's fantastic. It's so crazy, off the wall, carnage, fun.
Yeah.
I just
They cast
It's a
Juliette
ride.
Lewis because she became friends with Tarantino on Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
And she was only 23 when she made this movie. And I think she was supposed to play a 17-year-old.
does she go? She ends up going with.
No. He's like, I'm an asshole, but I'm not a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
So like he leaves her behind.
She
that's
offers, but he leaves it
I
where
think
it
she should
is.
have went.
And also, what's interesting is like, we've been talking about how actors kind of make these choices for their characters, like with Fright Night, where they made like these big backstories. And Clooney was the one who decided to give Seth like his tattoos, his tribal tattoos.
Yeah.
And that was because he had just seen this movie called Once Were Warriors, which starred Tamura Morrison, the guy who played Jango Fett in the Star Wars prequels. And this movie just like everyone was just decked out in tribal tattoos, and Clooney just thought that was like so badass. He's like, I want a tribal tattoo, And so like that was like a choice for his character. And it's kind of funny because like this was like Clooney's on the rise career movie. And only 2 years later, he was doing Batman and Robin with Joel Schumacher, who did The Lost Boys. Almost ruined his career right there. Killed the Batman franchise for a good 5 years, I think. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
It's funny how it all kind of ties together. Everybody's connected.
But I swear to God, I love the opening scene of this movie. I think this is one of like the best opening scenes of any movie ever, where it's all very slow and like, the guy kind of, Earl McGraw gets out of his car and just kind of cracks his leg.
Yeah. It's
And,
classic Tarantino.
and just walks in, and it's all very like subtle, and you don't think anything's wrong. It's just kind of like weird and boring. You're like, where's this going?
Yeah.
Then the minute he goes to the bathroom, like you find out there are these 2 guys holding girls hostage in the back, and like they're threatening to kill like the clerk.
I think that's the moment it becomes a Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
And then when the vampires come in, it becomes something completely
Robert
different.
Rodriguez movie.
I think
Yeah.
I think Robert
Yeah.
Rodriguez takes over as soon as they cross the border.
Yeah. As soon as they go, as soon as Cheech Marin
Yeah, as
appears.
soon as Cheech appears, it's Robert Rodriguez.
And what's funny is so Tarantino.
I didn't signal that cop.
So when Tarantino was gearing up to make Pulp Fiction, like he approached John Travolta originally to star as Seth Gecko in From Dusk Till Dawn. And Travolta was like, I don't get vampire films. I don't really like them. And he's like, okay, well, what about this movie Pulp Fiction? And Travolta was like, oh, tell me more about Pulp Fiction. And of course, he went on to do that. But his wife, Kelly Preston,
Vincent Vega,
was always like she met Tarantino through John Travolta's making Pulp Fiction with him, and so she always remembered like the vampire movie that he had pitched her husband way back when. And so when they were finally getting it off the ground, she's like, hey, do you have a part for me in there? And so that's how she got cast as like the newscaster. And funny enough, Jude, do you know the body count in this movie?
Oh shit, I forget. Is it 122?
It is. You nailed it. 122 people die in this movie.
122 people, huh?
Yeah.
At last count.
Nice. I like
Not including vampires.
I like not including vampires.
No, that was everyone.
That was
Everybody.
humans.
I think everyone.
Oh.
It was a cumulative total.
Oh wow. I like the reveal at the
Amazing.
end that the bar is sitting on top of ancient like Mayan ruin.
Yes,
thing.
I love
was
that
really cool.
final shot.
That was a really good final shot.
And the music in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, music's on point. Every Tarantino movie has on point music.
Yeah.
Robert Rodriguez
Yeah.
too.
There's so much about this movie that doesn't make sense and doesn't follow the rules, but I just don't care because I
who
love it
cares?
so
It's just
much.
fun. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Go to the movie and have some fun and watch some gore.
And they have some really good lines in the movie, like like, Richie, would you eat my pussy for me, please?
Yes. and then
Just weird things like when the guy like opens up the bathroom door when she's on the toilet.
close the door, please.
Yeah, and he closes the door and he does that weird thing where like
He's like
he's just,
so
like, leering at her.
creepily closes
and
the door.
And then it cuts back to Clooney and he's like hiding in the shower with Richie. And he just gives her another like really creepy look where he just kind of raises his eyebrows like, nice.
Yeah, okay, good job. Good job distracting him. Matt Tarantino?
Back in Hollywood, yeah.
Back in Hollywood.
Back in Hollywood.
So like I initially ran into him at the Cannes Film Festival back in 2005, I want to say, because he was promoting Kill Bill Volume 1. But I didn't actually get to meet him then. But then I ran into him at a movie screening in Hollywood. And I went up to him and I was like super nervous. And I was just like, hey, Mr. Tarantino, I don't mean to bother you, but I'm a big fan. Can I just get a quick picture with you? And he was like, no, fuck off.
Really?
Yeah. And he's just like a complete asshole.
Which is verbatim every interaction anyone anywhere has ever had with Quentin
But at least he's
Tarantino.
consistent. Like
Yeah.
he's always an asshole. You know? Well, the worst part about this movie is Tarantino's acting. Like he really shouldn't have been cast in this film, but I understand why he was. But it's kind of funny because Tarantino's one of those guys. He's like a wannabe actor who got into directing because he wanted to act, and it turns out he's a better director than he is an actor. And as he gets older, he actually gets worse at acting because like every movie he appears in, like he just it becomes cringier and cringier.
Well, Jimmy, I don't need you to tell me how good my fucking coffee is, all right, Jules? Like, that's classic.
That was early on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
But you get to Django Unchained and stuff like that.
What, the Australian accent?
It's terrible.
I don't know.
It's terrible. Like he does not need to be acting. He's a terrible actor. Even when he turned into a vampire, he looked like Frankenstein.
Yeah, that was weird.
He did look like
He went way over the top with
But
him.
all of the vampires looked
But not that
super
weird.
crazy.
Like his forehead got like 4 times larger than it already was. It's really weird.
and he had those big bolts on the side.
In the original script, both geckos and the entire Fuller family and the geckos all survive in the original script.
Mm-hmm.
And as Tarantino was working on the script, he's like, you know what, that's kind of boring. We need stuff to like have it something at stake.
We need people to die.
Yeah. So he had Seth survive, and then he had one person from the family survive, and he was like, okay,
This girl's entire family dead.
Yeah. And she just gets left in the desert.
and
You want some company?
yeah, and Cheech is like, okay, 30%, or like 15.
25.
Negotiating. All right. We've been talking for quite a while, so thank you guys.
Vampires.
It's
I can go on.
Dark Night.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to keep talking about vampires, hit me up at I am Jujuju on Instagram or Twitter.
There you go.
And I'll talk about vamps all day
There you go.
and all night.
Kadish, where can they find you?
At Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter.
And I am the Salty Nerd. You can find me at salty_nerd. If you like what you've heard so far, you can go to our Patreon account. It's saltynerdclub.com. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on Patreon, because if we do that, then we can do this full time. We can offer you guys some great content, and we can expand, and we can talk about new subjects and different movies, and maybe even move into video games a little bit more often, and a lot of other cool stuff that we have planned that we just don't quite have the funds or the time to do. So saltynerdclub.com would be greatly appreciated. You can pick a tier. Also, again, shout out to our top Patreon, Hosboy, on our Barbarian level. Thank you so much for your support, man. Really appreciate it. Have a great night, everybody.